Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of the Variant Rules podcast. I'd like to first take a moment to promote our channel, Variant Rules. If you like the game, we actually have one running, been running, I believe we're level 8 now. Check our live tab on the YouTube channel. All our VODs are there. Also, would like to start off with promoting the PF2E Humble Bundle going on right now. It's worth about $422 worth of PF2 campaigns, pawns, flip maps, books, even one of the newer books that just came out, The Secrets of Magic. Seems like really well known right now. It's breaking records, but just like to throw that out there to everybody. And also welcome all my fellow podcasters. Say hello, everybody.
Hi.
Yeah, what's up, guys?
Remember to like, comment, subscribe, all those nifty things, and alarm bell ring.
What's going on, everybody?
Had to do it.
Yep, you got to do it. So this podcast, we're just going to kind of talk about some popular topics that are going on in the PF2E community, kind of give our thoughts and some solutions to some of the questions that popped up, and otherwise just bullshit about the cool things we ran across. So we're going to start with, there was a Reddit post about a third-party dedication, bounty hunter dedication. And they had a particular feat called Dog Pile, where it allowed you, if you had a hunt, if you're a bounty hunter, you have a hunted prey, and you are flanking with another teammate, both you and a teammate get a debuff to AC and Fortitude and Reflex DC for grapple, shove, and grip checks. And there was a lot of talk about if that was too broken, if it wasn't strong enough, and we thought it would be a good idea to kind of give our thoughts.
Just for some clarification real quick, the penalty applies to the target being flanked.
Yeah.
They take the penalty to their, not only to their AC, but also to the Fortitude and Reflex DCs. Personally, I think this is it's probably spot on. If anything, I might say it's a little weak, it being a 10th level feat, but not by very much at all. I like the fact that it encourages team play, but the fact that it requires the target to be flanked and it only provides that benefit to the two flanking balances it really.
What about if we're looking more into instead of just common builds where it's only you have your single class, but you have free archetype? What is that? Do you still find it kind of weak, or is there more value in there?
I would say it's definitely gonna be probably a little bit stronger in the case if your group is running free archetype, purely because of the fact that you don't have to give up a class feat in order to take it. Well, technically, you would have to give up 2 class feats in order to take Dog Pile at the very minimum. You need the dedication for Bounty Hunter as well as the actual feat itself. Not having to give up class feats and still being able to take it, it's actually that makes it a little bit stronger, but I still wouldn't say necessarily by a lot. It still feels pretty balanced.
Yeah, I feel like the fact that only works for you and the one flanking it, and it only target grapple, shove, and grip, it seems like not too big of a deal.
I always like something that encourages the use of non-attacking actions, especially grapple, shove, and trip sort of things. Those actions are very near and dear to my heart. I love abusing them to make the DM's life difficult.
Well, also too, there's a heritage that you can buy straight from the Paizo website for centaurs, and we're not even level 10 yet, and I already have access. I'm playing a centaur in our campaign. I already have access to a feat that'll give me a +4 to my shove and force open checks. And that's just there all the time.
The piggybacking off of, I think it's going to be kind of sleeper strong in groups that honestly do flank a lot, like that do try and eke out every little bit of an advantage. I honestly think it's it's gonna be sleeper good, in my opinion. Just
well, it's like that's why I say like anything that encourages the use of grapple, shove, and trip is good in my book. Purely because of like I feel like Pathfinder is balanced around debuffing enemies, and there are a lot of groups I feel like that have a hard time because of the fact that no one respects these sorts of actions. Like everybody's just like, I want to do as much damage as possible, but sometimes if one person gives up their damage, they can drastically increase the amount of damage that one of the party members does. Just because like a flat-footed penalty is that's essentially a +2 to your ally's attack roll, and in a lot of situations, that's an extra 10% chance to crit for your allies, and that essentially just doubles their damage. So,
and that's assuming that they don't have rogues or potentially even any weapon with a deadly trait, right? Like those all trigger off crit. Not only double their damage, they wind up doing magnitudes more damage to this target, and all you did was trip a guy, right? Like
it's one action for you, and your entire party benefits. It's like, and basically depending on your party composition and the target's DCs is kind of where you want to like focus your efforts. Grapple is very good when you have you have a ranged heavy party, and then trip is very good when you're mostly melee. And beyond that, when you have a pretty even distribution of player characters, then you just kind of go, based off of situation and your target's DCs. But like having a -2 penalty to their DCs for grapple and trip makes a lot of builds much easier to play.
Yeah, your ranger might not like all those trips, but
your ranger might not like it if you trip too much. But at the same time, it actually comes out into it basically comes out in a wash for rangers, purely because they're still flat-footed for the purposes of things like precision ranger, and some of their abilities, but they don't get the -2 to AC because they get the target that's prone gets a +2 from being prone. Yeah.
So, would you guys like your guys' opinions? Do you think it's too strong, balanced, too weak? Let's go down the list. Ginger, what do you think?
Rules as written, I think it's a little too weak, to be honest. I feel like with free archetype, it's about in line, maybe a little strong, but overall, I think it's well enough balanced.
Brack?
If for free archetype, I honestly think this is sleeper. I think it is like for groups that will like try and eke out every bit of an advantage. I honestly think it is going to be ridiculous with other people who take advantage, who have the stats to trip, to disarm, to shove. I do. I think that's
But do you think it's too strong, sleeper, or do you think it's good?
I think it's strong. I don't think it's too good, but it depends. I think it's on that little weird middle ground. Like it could be, but we'd have to see. Like maybe we should try it at some point as a group. That's just me though.
Ro, what do you think?
I think it's similar to what Rax said. I think it's like not a feat. Like if you're a person like me who you have like a bunch of builds like in the back, in the bank somewhere, where you make a build all the way to level 20 and you're like, okay, I'm gonna play this in XYZ campaign coming up. I don't think it's a feat that you take like when you're doing that, but I think it could be a feat that you take if your party is like a melee heavy flank heavy, like rogue, fighter, monk kind of like dex melee group, like Rack was saying, like if your group can take advantage of it, it's like I think it's really strong. But I think it's it's one of those situational feats where like you're not gonna take it if you don't at least have another 2 or 3 melee in your party with you. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so I agree that it's kind of like, I would say overall it's a pretty middle ground feat. But in the right party, I think it's like a very high tier feat.
Okay. Xander?
Yeah, basically I kind of agree with Ginger and Ro, where it's super situational. Great when it's in that situation, right? When you're able to kind of, when the stars align and you're able to pull this off, then it's, then it's strong, it's great. But then at the same time, like Ro said, if your party comp does not kind of support that kind of play, it's kind of useless unless you find yourself in that great situation. If your party is really tactical, I can see it being, like Rack said, the sleeper power kind of feat. But it's super situational, so it just kind of it really just depends on party dynamic, like the build of your party and stuff like that.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you guys are saying. Plus, I think from a flavor perspective, I think it's really awesome. Like if you're in a you're a bounty hunter, you're in a group of other bounty hunters, or they're on the same mission as you, like it kind of makes sense that you're both working together to non-lethally take this guy out. So I think it's fun flavor-wise and mechanic-wise. It seems fair. Could you abuse it? Sure. There's plenty. We definitely try to abuse everything. So we could definitely find an abuse, a way to use this and abuse it. But I think it's pretty fair, and it's pretty cool archetype. Okay, so we're gonna move on to our next topic. Just in case you guys didn't see last week's episode, or you guys aren't familiar with it at all, there's an app and a website called Path Builder, and it's a free PF2E character builder. There was talk on the Pathfinder Reddit. People were kind of confused on certain aspects of the program. More specifically, the problem was looking at equipment and armor and item and feats that would have a colored, like a colored square next to them with a number. People were kind of wondering what this was about, and so we just wanted to kind of cover a couple of things that we picked up and learned about Path Builder. We've been using it for over a year now, but we'll start with that one, and that one specifically is if the colored box is just like gray or blue, like a light blue, that you just can use it willy-nilly, as long as you are the level that the number says in the box. If it's dark blue, then it is is it uncommon?
Dark blue is rare.
Dark blue is rare.
Orange is uncommon.
Orange is. So,
and then there's actually another color specifically on Path Builder that's green. That is for third-party content.
Third-party. Yep. And so when you're building a character, your GM decides, hey, no rare items or no common ancestries or something like that. He's got it. The website's got it really well color-coded. You can know what you can and get. Any other tips for using Path Builder, guys?
Specifically talking about the item levels and stuff. That's mainly for when you're crafting an item. You can use an item of any level, unless they have a specific requirement, like you have to have a certain proficiency rank in a particular skill. That's mostly with talismans and similar items. But any character can use any item. It's just you probably won't see any items that are more than a level above you. unless your GM is just extremely generous.
Yeah, and or even just like you know, getting like my brain runes for like your armor. Like depends on like what level they are. It could be, if you're lucky and you're like your GM's handing out like Ginger said, like a madman, you know something's going down. But
so usually hold on to your butt if your GM starts dropping items that are 2 levels or more above you. But yeah, other than that, just when you're looking at uncommon and rare items, most of those are going to be, for one, harder to identify if you find them. Additionally, they'll be more difficult to craft unless you have some specific extra instruction. And then in a lot of cases, some of those items just may not even be available per your GM's discretion due to setting conflicts or just, you know, it could be any reason that your GM just decides that they don't want those items in their game. Because I think a lot of people don't realize that classes like the gunslinger and the inventor are actually uncommon classes, and so they don't necessarily fit in all settings. So those classes are likely to be suppressed in some games. So a similar thing goes for a lot of the items and stuff that are marked uncommon.
Yeah, there are feats that are rare that are like specifically for a certain campaign, like Adventure Path.
Yeah, there's like region locked, which you'd have to work with your GM to kind of like figure out, like, could I use this kind of thing? Because you might have to come up with a kind of like a flavor way to make it work in the world kind of thing. But that's just, you know, that's just open discussion with your GM to kind of figure stuff like that out, because it depends on how open they are to.
When you guys were first like getting used to Path Builder, was there any things that you, like, issues you ran into that you think might help some new people to it, or you guys want to go on to the next?
One little oddity, and it's not really an oddity, it's one of those things you kind of have to get used to, but it makes sense. Modifiers, spell slots, spell lists, things like that don't update unless you change your character's level. So if you're building a character for a specific level range, make sure that you go and select that level for your character in Path Builder as you're building them, so you can see what you're going to be looking at as far as power level. Alternatively, I would recommend just setting your character to level 20 right off the bat. That way you can see just everything that they have available as you select feats and such. Just because those things do not show up as long as your character is still set to level 1. And that setting you can change at will. You just click the icon that shows their level, and you select the correct level that you want to show.
There anybody else?
Yeah.
Oh, it's pretty straightforward, like you said. So I'm good.
Okay. All right, and so next topic, there was a Reddit post asking people how important you think it is for the GM to know the PC's ability, how the PC's abilities work. And they kind of just were talking about, like, how helpful do you guys think it is that the GM knows everything, or how little do they need to know when it comes to making their campaign and their encounters. One thing I would like to point out, there is a website, and we'll put it down in the description because it's too long to just go, but there's a PF2E encounter builder that works really, really awesome. So if you're a GM new to Pathfinder and you're trying to build something, you can set your party size, level, and then what kind of creatures you're looking for each specific encounter, and you can drag and drop as many as you want, and it gives you a trivial, low, moderate, severe, or extreme setting, depending on what you put in there, and then how much XP should go along with said encounter. Make encounters really, really easy. One hint from us: if you're playing with a group that uses all the bells and whistles like we do, the dual class, free archetype, ancestral paragon, if you just treat your party as one level higher than what their level is, like say if everybody's level 2, you treat it as a level 3, and then build the encounter towards level 3, it comes out really, really well. And we as the players don't usually feel too underpowered to go against that. In fact, I think our GM goes a bit above that to make us scared.
One specific caveat I would point out. You want to treat them as one level higher when you're building the encounter, if you're using all of the extra rules. However, do not use monsters that are more than 4 levels above their actual, because you get a lot more breadth in a character. You get wider, more rounded characters, but their numbers don't increase.
Be the same. Yeah.
Yeah, the modifiers are still the same as they would be for a level 2, for example, character. But when you're building an encounter, you build it as if they were level 3 characters. Just for boss monsters, do not use a monster that's more than level 6, because you will very likely kill your party.
You'll basically end up with a creature or monster that has an AC that you cannot hit unless you roll a crit or like a 19 or something, right? Because of modifiers.
And they're critting on like a 2.
Exactly. Exactly. Basically, your monster then just absolutely raffle stomps the party, and the party just feels completely ineffectual, and it's just an all-around bad time.
Remember, it's just a free action to cry. That's all it is.
The other thing too is it's also even more dangerous to do that at lower levels.
Yeah,
specifically like levels.
Just one-shot somebody.
Yeah, levels 1 and 2 are pretty rough if you're building the encounters for higher level. But anything past level 3 or 4, you should be fine.
So back to the original question, is it important for the GM to know the PC's abilities, how they work? It's not an ability, but knowing what their modifiers are and how hard it may be to hit, or how easy it would be to be hit by a creature, I would say is very important. It's probably the biggest thing. But as far as general knowledge, how effective do you guys think a GM can be with a basic knowledge of PCs, or no knowledge? Kind of learning the rules and building an encounter that way.
I would say they should have a nice, solid understanding of the fundamentals. I don't think they need to know everything, because when players do pull something up, like knowing how the core rules work for what situation, if they're trying to pull something crazy, I think just having that solid foundation will be able to help them get out of any situation.
Yeah, I would say that, like, best case scenario, you want to know as much as you can know. But you don't need to know everything about your characters, through your player characters, in order to be an effective GM. Because you already have so much on your plate as it is. You gotta know how your monsters work, and you just like the basic rules and stuff that you have to know. But I feel like the main benefit to Pathfinder over some other systems is that Pathfinder's rules are pretty much just laid out for you from the beginning. So the players can just go and learn how all of their class abilities function. So that takes a lot of the pressure off the GM, because the GM does not have to make rulings on things most of the time. So the players they know what they can do. They say, all right, I'm doing this thing. Here's how this works. And the GM just says, okay, roll it. That's how that interaction goes. But I totally agree with what Savage said. The main thing is that as a GM, you want to know about a basic understanding of the overarching rules and specifically how your monsters' modifiers and numbers interact with the player characters for their level, because that's going to be the most important thing as far as balancing goes for your encounters.
Yeah, I'd say like in general, the GM should be more concerned with knowing the rules of like the world around their players, kind of thing. Like the players should know what their character can do, at least to the most part, what their feats do, whatever. The only time that like a GM should like definitely be aware of like a certain ability that a player character has, and this would be more on the player to kind of remind them, is certain classes do have just like passive things that happen, like the investigator, for example, right? They might have the that's odd feat, and that is just a passive thing that happens where every time they enter a room, the GM has to inform them of something that they notice, something hidden, right? Now, in that case, the GM obviously needs to be aware of that, right? Otherwise, it can very easily just get overlooked, and that's, kind of a key part of a potential investigator class.
Yeah. That's like a psychic also has something like that, where they passively are always searching for haunts and other things like that.
But, sorry, go ahead, Savage.
No, you're good.
But I mean, it's like, like with that, though, it's like that's kind of, the player has to make sure that the GM is aware, oh, I have this feat, just so you know, kind of thing. And then the GM just keeps that in the back of their head, right?
Also, if if you're a GM and you realize encounter after encounter, your players are just kind of like monstrably running through everything you throw at them, and you're not like putting out too much difficulty, you can always do like our GM and just bring out mobs that will blind you without a save or get you enfeebled.
Blind fighting. Okay.
I'm not gonna lie, man. There's like a small but slightly growing list of feats that I'm just like, I need to always have these with any character.
Yeah.
One of them is that bargain hunter.
Because then they got to start adapting to you instead of you adapting to them. But that's I digress. Anybody else maybe have a different opinion, or are we kind of all on the same page that a somewhat basic knowledge of what your players can do is?
Yeah, I think we are.
Okay, so next topic is about casters in PF2E. There's been a lot of talk with people just now joining PF2E, feeling like casters aren't that strong. For instance, one question or one Reddit topic was about standard DCs being too high, and then another one was about casters asking, how important is it to increase the skill associated with your casting class? For instance, Arcana as a wizard, or nature as a druid, something like that. We thought we would talk a little bit about that. I'm not as proficient in casting as some of my friends here, so I'm gonna let them kind of give their opinions.
When I first came into Pathfinder, we came in. It's not even like we started a new campaign in Pathfinder. We were like level 6 or 7 in our 5e campaign, and then we switched. And in 5e, I was a sorcerer warlock, just blasting, right? And then I came to Pathfinder, and it was all like AoE spells and like utility spells, and I was like, oh, okay. But then, like, I had a good amount of melee in my party. I didn't get to like set up those AoE, those big AoE spells a lot of the times, and it felt really bad and really weak compared to 5e. But what you learn is, as I like learned the system more, learned what like the utility spells actually do, and like how difficult terrain works and all that stuff in Pathfinder 2e, there's a lot of like cool control mage style builds that you can like utilize in Pathfinder if your party works with you well. And even if they don't, I mean, my these guys played with me.
That's your party problem. That's what that is.
Yeah, if they don't work with you, then it just becomes their problem, right? And like my party found out when I was just like, "Hey, Elemental Annihilation Wave, 2 rounds, move."
You might want to move.
Yeah, I feel for you, Ro. Like coming from 5e as a caster and then swapping over to 2nd edition, I wasn't really always the big blaster, so like I didn't really have that that issue where I'm like, oh, the damage spells are now much more limited in 2e. But I've always been one of those people that likes to buff, debuff, control, mess around with how enemies move. Like I've always enjoyed the control aspect of spellcasting in battle. That so it didn't really affect me. I think the one thing that threw me off was getting used to the action economy in 2e compared to 5e. That's what kind of messed with me a little bit, because you have a little more freedom in 2e to do stuff compared to 5th edition. But that's just me.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, and that was one of the things that I think made caster so much better. Is once you get used to the action economy and how using your spells tactically and stuff, like with your action economy, and once you get into higher levels, you get feats like quicken casting and I forget what it's called, but you can basically sustain a spell for free.
Effortless concentration, I believe.
Effortless concentration.
I think that's what it's called.
It's a level 16. It's a level 16 feat. You're absolutely right. And you get quicken casting at 10, so you can start casting, set 2 actions or 3 action spells and action shorter, and get 2-3 spells out a round. If you're smart, you can get some really nice setup and do some really big damage. And there are still Master Blaster classes. It's just not as
it's not front and form. It's not the main thing that you're doing.
Yeah, you get it through I was actually thinking you get it through other classes. You get it through, I would say, mostly like Magus dual classes. If you're running dual class, or just Magus in general, like Spell Strike, especially because you can go into Starlight Span, which is ranged spell strikes, and those just hit like a truck, and it feels really nice, and it gives you that really like peak damage that you can do basically every other round, or even every round if you're smart with like you're recharging your Spell Strike and stuff. So yeah. Like, there are definitely ways to do it in 2e. Just the traditional casters are they have a lot more versatility in 2e, and there's a lot more options, but that does take away some of their like single target like blasting abilities. But I do think they wind up being just as strong, if not stronger, towards the higher levels because of the AoE and utility like combinations that you can get off.
I feel like you really do also have to be well prepared for whatever encounters that could happen. It's just, how well do you know what you need for what situation? And if you can predict that correctly and have, a good thumb on what's going down in the setting and what you're going to be going up against, you can definitely just go nuts and bring out some big stops.
So I would say having a well-rounded party that has a scout type character in it is insanely beneficial for caster types, because they can scout ahead, figure out what sort of monsters or enemies you're going to be up against, and then because you don't need to be able to see the enemy to recall knowledge, you just have to know what they are, so you can recall knowledge about a particular subject. And then you can just basically have a planning session with your party if the GM allows it before you guys go in, and basically know what saves to target before the combat even starts. Now, this works a lot more effectively if you get caught with your pants down, but a party that is good at planning ahead and scouting information is key.
So I know we play with variant rules, so our GM's got to go a little bit harder on us. We don't have a whole lot of experience with standard difficulty checks, but as far as difficulty checks go, in your guys' experience, what do you think about them? Do you think they're fair? Level 5? What do you think?
Honestly,
specifically of combat.
Yeah, let me see, because I don't have a chart pulled up in front of me. Let me see what the standard DC chart looks like, because I feel like they're in a pretty good place, and it could just be that sometimes the GM just needs to back off the difficulty a little bit. Some actions are not all actions are created equal, and so it very well just comes down to lost my train of thought.
While you're looking that up, Ro and Rack, what do you guys?
For me, I think for the most part, it's pretty fair. I think I'd probably err on the side of saying that, to be honest, like if it's not like your main stat, I could see a little bit of a struggle. You know, like
I mean, that kind of makes sense though. If that's not what your character is good at, then it's like.
But it isn't like barbarian. I'm always going to fail. You know, like I think it's fair enough that if you have like a high like if you start level 1 and you have like your +4 in your key ability, it should be easier. Yeah. I think at the end of the day, I mean, like it comes down to how the dice rolls. Like you still have better odds, as long as like you don't have like a negative in one of your modifiers. I think it's more than doable, but then again, I don't know how people are building.
As a specific example, let's see if I can look at let's say legendary athletics with maximum strength strength investment. You end up with a plus 33 athletics at level 20. If you're legendary and you have, because I am incorrect.
All right, let's figure it out. Xander, what?
Sorry.
So like kind of like what Rack was saying, where it's like if it is your main stat, that is what your character is good at. We'll need to wait for Ginger to get like the actual numbers going for like exactly what that kind of like percentage chance to succeed kind of works out as.
I have those ready now if you want.
Oh yeah, sure, go ahead.
So a max strength invested character at level 20 with legendary athletics has a plus 34. So without any magic items that boost your athletics skill further, you just have a flat plus 34 to any athletics check. The standard difficulty check for a level 20 character is DC 40, which means that you can meet that DC by rolling a 6 on a D20, which means you have a 3 out of 10. You have a 70% chance of succeeding with full strength investment. Let's say you're not like fully invested in strength. Let's say you're a different type of character, but you still have a decent athletics score. Let's say you don't have any strength investment at all, but you still are legendary in athletics, which is kind of uncommon. But that you still cap out at a plus 30 on your athletics skill, which means you still pass that DC, a standard DC of 40 on a 10. So you have a 50-50 shot of landing it. Now, if you're not fully invested in athletics, let's say you drop down to master and you don't have any strength, well, now you have to roll a 12. So it gets progressively more difficult to do things that you're not as proficient in. But the chances of actually succeeding those checks at those levels with specific investments is still a very decent chance. And now these standard DCs can be additionally modified by the GM based on the circumstances to be more difficult or less difficult, because there's actually a range of these DCs. There's very easy, normal, hard, very hard, and those each change by plus or minus 2 in each direction. So like a very hard DC for a level 20 character would be a 44, which means that fully in strength invested legendary athletics character at level 20 would still need to roll a 10. So it's still 50-50 shot that they succeed. So I think the math on standard DCs is very solid overall. It feels very fair because characters that are heavily invested into something are going to have an easy time hitting most of those DCs, whereas a character that's not as invested is going to have a harder time, but still not undoable unless they're just not trained in that skill at all, which is fair in my opinion.
Yeah, it also promotes having some more diverse parties, right? Because, you're going to want to have the guy that can bust down a door, like the strength guy that's trained in athletics. But you might, if you want to be able to do like all kinds of different checks, you're going to need the bookworm. You're going to need, you're kind of, it works out in kind of supporting different classes or different builds.
It helps.
There's a reason for everyone.
It helps enforce character identity, and allowing different characters to shine and not stepping on each other's toes, for sure.
The question about the standard DCs was more towards casters in encounters. So casters versus fortitude, reflex, and will save.
So you typically won't be going up against a standard DC in combat, though, because unless you're doing something that's not related to.
I think standard DC in this instance is character, enemy compared to player.
Okay, well, in it, that being the case, the casters should be utilizing their knowledge of the enemies that they're fighting, either by trial and error with their spells, or preferably recalling knowledge and getting good information to target specific saves on their target, because most monsters, unless they're like intended to be a super difficult boss monster, they're going to have one DC that's like significantly lower than the rest of their DCs. And if you target that DC, you have a much more likely, a much higher chance of success of getting the maximum benefit from your spells. Again, a lot of it falls back to like knowledge and
counterbalance too.
So when building your character, it would be a good idea when you're choosing your spells, you look for a nice mix of attacking, reflex for will saves, and then also debuffs such as frighten, which reduces basically everything on an enemy down by 1 or more, depending on how high you go, which would bring down the enemy's roll when they're trying to save against your attacks.
Yes, and basically, like, again, it all comes down to how well can you stack the odds in your favor, and there are several ways to do that. Spell selection, like you said, is a very good choice. Having a wide variety of spells that target all different kinds of saves is very beneficial in those situations, as well as being able to successfully recall knowledge about an enemy to find out their DCs and stuff, or which one's the lowest, so that you can target that. Additionally, having your marshals in melee range do things that can potentially reduce the enemy's saves. The things like having the frightened condition. If you have let's say you have a bard in your party and they're a very charismatic character, having them with the Bon Mo skill feat should be able to debuff the enemy's will saves. Anything like that is going to be super beneficial for casters. So a lot of it is developing that teamwork with your party as well.
So would
I
you
see
say
your Bon Mot and I raise you Dirge of Doom.
I mean, yeah.
would you guys
Here's the thing though: is Dirge of Doom and Bon Mo stack with each other. because
It's
Dirge
true.
of Doom is frightened, and Bon Mo is its own status condition.
It's true.
So
Yeah.
for newer players, without knowing debuffs or things like that, would you say just going against monsters as a caster, do you guys feel weak to that, or do you think it just kind of comes down to the dice roll?
I think you could label this as a column A, column B. Having multiple spells prepared, like spellcasters, like especially for prepared casters like Wizard or like Druid, like having limited slots and having to declare that what you're taking that day, it can feel kind of shitty if like none of your guys, like you can't get any information on like what's the weakest save and trial and error. You have like that limited amount of just utility from yourself. It could probably feel pretty bad if your whole team's sucking, you're sucking, and you just can't get anything off of like whatever you're fighting. I think it does feel bad, but that's just how the dice roll sometimes.
Well, the other thing too is spontaneous casters definitely have an advantage in this sort of situation because of the fact that they just have a spell list that they can just choose from at will, pretty much. So as long as you know a bunch of different varieties of spells, you should be okay. It's prepared casters that have a bit more difficult of a time. However, there are feats that mitigate the issue somewhat. There are some feats, I know Wizard gets one, where you can modify your prepared spells by spending 10 minutes, I think, to study
I think
once per day.
that's one of it's not a feat. It's one of the
It was one of the studies.
Yeah, the studies. I think it's spell
Okay.
substitution. I think.
Yeah,
Unless hold on. Let me go.
I feel like there is a feat that will allow you to do
There's
that
a
once per
feat.
day.
There
but-
is a feat.
Yeah.
There
I can't
is
remember
the
what
spell
it's
substitution thesis that you can do, and I think there is another feat. But then again, you're at that point you're trading in, your higher level spells for lower level. Be able to switch out pretty quick. Like, it is good. There is a trade off to it, but still at the same time, you still have a limited amount of resources as a caster. And
Well,
if you
the
don't
other
get
thing
any of that
too-
information from your recall knowledge, throwing those spell slots out, you're gonna be drained up pretty quick. Like you might have like a whole day's left of encounters. We don't know.
Yeah. The other beneficial thing is I prefer talking about builds agnostic of magic items, but for any caster, getting your hands on a staff is going to be extremely helpful. It vastly expands your repertoire of spells and the number of spells that you can use in a day. So having access to multiple different staves is a very expensive endeavor for sure. But if you can get different kinds of staves and wands and scrolls, those sorts of items definitely extend your longevity.
Yeah, and the further we get down, if you do take the right skills and feats, you can go scroll savant later on as a wizard and have extra, if you two levels lower than your highest spell you can cast for free, extra spells just ready for that day, and it lasts for that day. Like that does help, but earlier on, it's still throwing out spells willy-nilly. I could see how newer players and even casters can get flustered at enemies just succeeding saves if stuff's just not landing on the dice for you or your team. I can see how that feels bad.
One thing might help would be the feat dubious knowledge. So even if you fail, you get a truth and a lie, right?
Mm. But
So,
then you're still rolling at a 50-50,
Yeah, but I would say even a 50-50 is better than not knowing anything.
Yeah, true enough. But still throwing out a spell willy-nilly, without you're still looking at. Okay.
See, here's the other thing too: is you can lean into your character's RP a bit there too, because let's say you're a wizard, you're a very knowledgeable fellow, you're an intelligence-based caster, which says you're not taking notes on the sorts of enemies that you fight, right? So you let's say you're fighting taking out an army of goblins, right? Over you're infiltrating a goblin stronghold, okay? let's say you spend the first combat or so figuring out what their weaknesses are. Well, then you just take notes on like, well, this spell was particularly this type of spell was particularly effective against these goblins. So that way, the next day or like the next time you're fighting them, you just break out those spells and you just have a much easier time of it going forward. Like that's a lot of it too. Is like you can just lean into that sort of. I know a lot of people don't like taking notes. I
love taking notes. What do you mean?
I would say like a lot of people don't.
Yeah, but you are a wizard in real life.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like like you just are a wizard.
Yeah, so like I definitely recommend like taking notes on the enemies that you face if you're a caster. For a couple of reasons. Like I said, it's good RP. Like why would a caster, especially an intelligence-based caster, not be taking notes on the enemies that they face? And two, it helps you in the long run because metagaming in PF2E isn't great, but game knowledge is extremely helpful. And it's an odd distinction, but you can have a lot of game knowledge and leverage that into your character without metagaming per se.
So for those players who are just starting and are being casters, would you say that, like, yeah, it might seem a little rough now because you're still figuring out the system, but basically the more knowledge you have, the better a caster and the better a caster you will be, and a better caster would feel.
Yeah, I'll definitely say, like, going and looking, and I hate to say it, you gotta study your spells, boys and girls. Hate to say it, you have to. You're gonna have to put some extra time, because if you want to feel like you're adding to the party and being able to pull something like a rabbit out of your ass at any point, excuse my language, but, it's true. You have to, look at what you have in your bag of tricks, and sometimes you might take a spell and like as a wizard that is like, this is my get out of jail free card. This is your. It might not be used very often, but when you have it and you've prepared for it and it's there, oh boy, does it feels great. It feels great to have one of those, like, look what I have ready for this situation. Mm-hmm. But once again, roll the dice.
As a caster, because you played 5e for a really long time, as before going to Pathfinder, what's the biggest comparison between the two? Like when you're playing, like, I never played a caster in 5e. I only ever played melee, so I don't know. But like, can you just go into 5e blasting, or is there thought like that you have to make there?
There is some thought, like both 5e and 2e definitely, as a caster, you do have to think, like, could you go unga bunga me take big splash damage AoE? Yeah, you can. You go ahead, take all the blast spells you want. Fireball, light it up, fine. Lightning bolt, fine, light it up, it's good. Like, you can do that. But then you start getting to the point where you have allies in front of you, or you have people that won't give you the time of day to let you blast really quick before they move in. Like, that's just something you have to deal with in both editions. Like, there is planning you have to do. Did 5e make it easier to blast? Oh yeah, they had a bunch of blast spells. Finding control spells, it was, digging through a lot of the blasts, the big unga bunga stuff.
I think another reason that casters feel underwhelming, specifically comparing between Pathfinder 2nd edition and D&D 5th edition, is that in D&D there's no critical success. So when you cast a spell, you're getting some damage out of it regardless in almost every situation. Whereas in Pathfinder 2nd edition, there is the possibility of the opponent critically succeeding their save, and you just get nothing. So that can feel really bad, but that just like, it drives home the point that we were making earlier of, you got to be targeting their weakest saves, because it's going to be way more difficult for them to critically succeed those saves.
On the other hand, though, I will counteract on that. In 5e, I'm going to point at rogues. You never threw reflex saves. Didn't matter. Evasion, you succeed. Critical success, you dodge meteor storm. Doesn't matter. You might be setting down a gigantic fucking meteor at somebody. The rogue literally just goes, nah, lol, I'm fine. It landed on me, I'm fine. No damage, it's fine. Crit success, Omega lol.
Well, and fighters, they can get, I think fighters can, possibly others as well, but they can get skills where, like if you're for your team, where they can, if they succeed the check, they get an automatic success. So you don't have to be, like in later levels, you don't have to be super worried about your teammates if you're going to drop some big shit, but
it's also a
one
magic
other thing
item
I wanted
specific
to,
for that too. There's a backdraft cape that reduces splash damage from your allies.
So
one thing that I wanted to bring up with what Ginger said about I lost my train of thought. You were talking about critical successes and not being able to do any damage. On the flip side of that, if I'm correct, 5e you can only crit on 20. In PF2E you can crit if they crit fail, which is they miss the check by 10. You get a higher possibility of a crit than before, but if you don't hit that very often, you know.
Yeah. Also, I mean, adding to that too, though, is that in 5e, there were no, like, the effects of a spell wouldn't ramp up depending on how badly you messed it up. While in, like, in Pathfinder, like, just for example, the blindness thing, right? Like, you crit fail on that, you are blind for,
thanks for reminding me,
for like 10 minutes, and it's like that just means you're screwed. That's it, you're done. Like that entire combat, you are blind. There's nothing you can do about it unless you got some kind of spell that can undo it, but that wouldn't be a thing in 5e, right? Like
I think one in particular that was used against us, if we crit succeeded, great news, nothing happened, and you're immune from here on out. If you succeeded, I think you were dazzled for one round. If you failed, you were blinded for one round. And if you crit failed, you were blinded for an hour.
It was 10 minutes. But yeah, that was the example that I was using, because practically all of us failed it and were blind for the one round.
I crit succeed.
Yeah, I crit succeeded, he was just fine. And then,
the rest of you guys,
honestly, the blindness spell is way nastier than that, because if you critically fail the blindness spell, you're just permanently blind. Period.
Yeah, like that's what I mean. It's like, there's nothing like that in 5e where you're just, that's it, you're done. Like,
well, there is.
I mean, there is.
People mind. People mind is one of those.
My favorite
that's a character loss. If you get hit by that.
Yeah, but I mean, like, the blindness isn't necessarily a character loss, because there are ways to, like, recover that, right?
Yeah, there are ways to recover that in 5e as well. You just need like, a restoration spell.
Yeah.
And higher level like counteract checks in Pathfinder are more balanced than they are in 5e as well. So, you may have
In closing, for you casters out there is hope. Like, the more you know about the game, the more you learn about the tactics for it, the better you will be at it, and the better it will feel.
The better you work with your teammates as well.
What do you mean? I have to work with my teammates? Oh my god!
That's not fun. I just run in,
love my team.
smash things.
Love my team.
Anybody got anything else in closing?
The usual stick of like, comment, subscribe, and hit that alarm bell.
Thanks for joining us. Still stick around here, and please help us out. Like, comment, subscribe. If there's any topics you guys would like us to discuss, please put them down in the comments. We will read those. We'll do that. Get some engagement would be awesome with you guys watching. Other than that, I think we're good for this week's podcast. We'll catch you guys in the next one. This week, actually, we're recording right now during our usual campaign. We had to take the week off. Our GM had to go out of state, but we'll be back at our usual time next Saturday. Until then, you guys all have a good week.
You guys take it easy.